Alex Newman on an ever-increasing budget for failed educational systems, snowflakes seeking to steal honor from American veterans, and more fallout on college campuses from the Kavanaugh decision. Next on The Dr. Duke Show. Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Duke. This is the show, The Dr. Duke Show, that covers stories impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses all across the nation. Greetings to all of our loyal listeners. Welcome aboard to our new ones. And we ask you to go ahead and please subscribe. It doesn't cost a penny. If you could subscribe to the show, that would be great. It helps our numbers out. Always glad to see you here. We podcast on iTunes, Google Play. Never miss an episode. All over your favorite podcast sites. Coming up later in the show, we'll be talking to our international correspondent, Alex Newman, who is live today in the studio about the Department of Education's massive new budget that was just approved by Republicans, Democrats, and a president who said he wouldn't do that anymore. So stick around for that. First, I want to bring in the one and only Katie Petrick for the top education stories of this week. Katie, where are we going today?
So it's been weeks and weeks, and we finally have an end result to what is happening with Brett Kavanaugh. He was confirmed 50-48 to be the newest justice of the Supreme Court. But the crazy has not calmed down, because now universities are responding and basically taking action for what they want to become the new norm on college campuses. To them, Christine Blasey Ford is a hero, and men basically beware. And the first two stories we're going to talk about kind of basically say this. So we have a story coming out of the University of Washington. It's not the university itself, but the students who attend the University of Washington. There's a group of them that made a website, and it's called Make Them Scared, and they post uncorroborated sexual assault claims against male students. And basically, if you take a look at the website, what you can do is they are putting not only names, but accounts, according to the victim, of things that men have done, and it's so far been all men, have done to women, and there's no corroborating evidence. It's like we've heard this before, and they're posting all the male's information online.
Yeah, this first batch of stories, the first 4 or 5 stories we've got today, are just incendiary. Our focus is going to be in these stories. Now that we've come through the Kavanaugh mess, how are universities and colleges just taking this story and running with it? How are the universities seizing this story, as you said, to give absolute credit to Blasey Ford without asking any questions about evidence or due process? How universities are recognizing an opportunity here with the Kavanaugh hearings. Even though Kavanaugh squeaked by 2 votes, the universities and faculty, radicals on campuses recognize this is a golden opportunity to further unmake the foundations of American justice, to further rip apart the Constitution of the United States. This is a classic example at the University of Washington, right? Where you've got students at UW who are simply creating a prescription list. This is looking more and more like McCarthyism all the time, isn't it? Although a very fascist version of progressive McCarthyism, where you can just accuse a man of anything. I mean, it makes sense, right? If you're teaching kids on college campuses that masculinity is by definition toxic, to be a male, and especially to be a white male, is to participate in patriarchy and ritual abuse of women, whether you ever have a negative thought of women in your life, simply by the color of your skin, you're complicit. You're teaching college freshmen that. Are we surprised now that these same geniuses have allowed women on campus to throw any allegation against a wall, to publish the information, the email addresses, where they work, where young men work, who might have done something? You can say anything you want in this forum. There's almost no filter, no censorship. And the University of Washington is looking into it, right? Yes, of course. Again, I guarantee if you had some kind of a prescription list, and to prescribe somebody in ancient Rome was to mark them down for assassination. To prescribe a prescription list was when a new emperor or a new general took power and wanted to make sure his enemies were rubbed out. He would create a list, a blacklist basically, and put a tick by the name of everybody on that list that had to die. That was a prescription list. We're bringing that now back onto college campuses without evidence, without due process. We've already seen those things mean nothing to the Democrats, to the progressives, to our universities. But the fact that UW Washington has not pulled this down, just again, hate to play the game, but if you flip this around, if men were making if white men or white people were making such allegations against minorities, if men were doing it against women, this kind of Texas justice, right? Just throw a name out there, throw a charge, make it stick, and get a posse. It wouldn't stand. The fact that the University of Washington is so careful to say, we'll look into this, we're not sure this is bad, shows you how far complicit the universities already are in unmaking constitutional values.
Yeah, and I took a look at the frequently asked questions list, and it's all the questions that a common sense person would ask. You know, what about victims who aren't female? You know, why don't they get their names up there, or have the perpetrators be up there if a male was abused? Well, and they say, well, as long as the claim passes our verification process, which the simple process is, you accuse someone, you say what happened to you, and we'll put it up there.
Yeah, that's
the process.
That's a verification process.
Yeah. The name submitted, it doesn't. They also say the gender and the political leanings don't matter to us. We are careful to use gender-neutral language across our reporting form and site. That being said, listen up here, obvious troll accounts like Brett Kavanaugh or Christine Blasey Ford will be ignored completely. We also do not publish the names of any prominent public figures unless exceptional evidence is provided. And if you look at the rest of the frequently asked questions, you can tell this is a group of students doing it because it's completely against any common sense format you would do with no corroboration, and they even respond to, well, what about innocent until proven guilty? And they say, well, by default, people will be skeptical of the claims on our list, and we aren't finding anyone innocent or guilty here.
No, you're
not
outing them, their personal information. You're making wildly inaccurate and unverified claims. So this is just character assassination. And it's starting from the bad premises that we saw in the Kavanaugh situation, right? You've got roughly 50% of American progressives who believe that you don't have to be guilty of anything to be drummed out of a job, that your career can be destroyed by allegations. I love, by the way, the signs that we're saying. Believe all rape survivors. I'm behind that. If somebody has survived rape, believe they were raped. But you've got to be able to prove that they've survived it, right? Because what we're seeing at the University of Washington is one of the outcomes of this kind of believe everybody for any reason. These women, assuming that they're mostly women at the University of Washington, who are making these allegations publicly and online, and again, causing a major problem for young men to have their names on that list. In the story, one young man was interviewed, didn't even know he was on the list. Right? He had to be told by the interviewers, and he was darn upset about it because this is going to follow him on social media. This is going to follow him. Be easy to find if you're doing a social media search trying to hire a kid for a job someday.
Now that he has been made known that he's on the list and he tries to get off, here's what happens if someone asks for their name to be removed. It says, we will first contact the accuser to inform them of the request. If they stand by the truth of their claim, then the individual will be informed of this, and the name will remain on the list.
Innocent until proven guilty is gone. You are guilty until proven innocent. We will not only allow perhaps a woman with some kind of a vendetta, a jilted lover, somebody who we're going to talk about a situation like this coming up in the future somewhere, where we've got young girls in high school accusing boys of sexual harassment without any evidence. We're going to allow an accuser to make a statement. Then when somebody tries to clear their name, who do we go back to? The accuser. See what's missing there? Any kind of intermediary justice, any kind of investigation. This is exactly what the left wants. We want to be able to say, because our constituents, primarily, we want them to be able to say, progressive women, that if anything happened to them, that should be de facto true. And an investigation now, we're being told, is itself a form of abuse. Remember that in the hearings, right? When they demanded an FBI investigation of Kavanaugh, when a number of people pointed out, well, why aren't we investigating Dr. Ford? Why aren't we investigating the legitimacy of her memories from 35 years ago? Why aren't we looking at who she's consulting with? Why aren't we looking into the fact that Democrat operatives helped her plan her speech? Why aren't we looking into the fact that she picked lawyers who had a long-standing grievance history as Democrat activists to investigate the accuser, even though her 35 years had gone by? To investigate the accuser is to further rape her. To investigate Kavanaugh can only have one outcome, that's guilty. To see this now at a college campus like the University of Washington, and to see Washington's very slow walking through this process, their refusal to condemn it adamantly, tells you we've gone down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, but meanwhile, we have Christine Blasey Ford. I said she's the hero, and that's what we have coming out from the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, where Ford has been nominated to receive the Distinguished Alumna Award. So she actually was a 1988 graduate. So that's where she got her bachelor's of psychology. And so she's being nominated by her alma mater by an English professor named Jennifer Ho, who states in her letter that Ford's testimony was something that was extraordinary and how ordinary it was.
Among every single constituency group that Dr. Ford cares about, she is a hero. She was never going to care about what Republicans in the Senate think of her, as if she actually cares about strange men on the street, what they think of her. What she's always cared about is her constituency, academics, women, progressive, liberals, Democrats, and amongst all those populations where she's lived her whole life, her whole academic life. If you're a university professor, and she has been all her life, you have a very limited scope. Your whole world is taken up by the academy. It's not like you're waiting part-time, waiting tables, right, to get to know the common man. Her whole constituency group, her whole world group, is people who think exactly like she thinks. And she's got $700,000 or so, at least, in GoFundMe money now that have been given to her. She has become a hero across the campus for feminist groups. You've got people, the Democrat Party fundraising on her testimony, right, to defeat Republicans. And now she's been nominated for Alumna of the Year at her alma mater. For all the so-called trauma of having to report details from 35 years ago, to argue that this is just negative or that there are no payoffs for Blasey Ford is really remarkable and something only a Democrat can get. An English professor who plays fast and loose with the truth, only someone like that would believe this.
It's all about truth and power.
You said it. It's not telling the truth. And this is the key distinction you need to know, Mom and Dad. When these Democrats, progressives, say tell the truth, they don't mean it. When they say speak truth to power, they mean tell power whatever you need to tell power to get it to stop being powerful. In other words, you can lie to the powerful if that gets you what you want. And there were a lot of lies told about Judge Kavanaugh. And in this instance, it didn't get them what they want. But just ask yourself this, Katie. If instead of a group of senators and the FBI who were tasked with looking into what happened with Kavanaugh and Ford, what if it was a panel of university professors who had to decide Judge Kavanaugh's fate? Okay. Yeah, you know what I'm telling about right now. He'd be quartered, drawn, and hanged. Yeah. Right, exactly. And that just goes to show you, never, never, never let anybody with an academic background presume to tell you what the law is or presume to tell you what absolute truth is in any form. Take everything anybody with a PhD says with a grain of salt.
I shall
including
do that.
Me.
Especially you.
Especially me.
I do every day.
Especially me.
Okay, so basically what you're saying about this panel of professors, well, we're getting a professor who is actually standing up and saying, you know what? Accusers lie sometimes, and they're trying to quarter him as well. So at the University of Southern California, USC, the professor is named James Moore. He's the director of the Transportation Engineering Program and Vice Dean for Academic Programs in the Viterbi School of Engineering. And he responded to a mass email that went out called Believe All Survivors. And his response, because he hit reply all, was, if the day comes you are accused of some crime or tort of which you are not guilty, and you find your peers automatically believing your accuser, I expect you will find yourself a stronger proponent of due process than you are now. Accusers sometimes lie. And for that, he should be fired, of course.
Yeah, this is on the University of Southern California campus. An email went around to everybody saying, we believe, we support, we unequivocally support what
Christine
Blasey
See,
Ford.
The thing is, we're already forgetting her name because let's be honest, it doesn't matter anymore.
With Dr. Ford.
Dr. Ford.
We will categorically believe any and everything Dr. Ford says, even though here we are at the University of Southern California campus. We don't know Dr. Ford. We have no input. We saw none of the evidence. We saw none of what the FBI produced. We're going to believe her because we're university professors. And it's always going to be an engineer, isn't it? Isn't that just
logic?
If you'd have asked me where that professor dared to stand up and say some people lie sometimes. And what a radical statement this poor fellow made. Some accusers lie, right? We've been told for 30 years, and it's true, we have African-American men in prison, oftentimes because white women have lied about them in rape cases, right? 2 37-year convicted African-Americans were recently released because they were wrongly accused by a white woman. So clearly, when it comes to racial relations, we can point out that white women will lie at times. We have jails full of people who have paid the price for that. Does that mean all women lie? No. But this intrepid engineer steps up and says, some women lie. That's a total engineering thing, right? Can you imagine an engineer who says, All bolts work all the time.
Jeez.
All welds hold all the time. We're not going to have any contingency plans, because when you engineer something, if you engineer it according to the laws of physics, it will last forever. No. Engineers know, and they have to take into account logic, empirical evidence, and the fact that not everything you're going to do that should do, that not everything you implement is going to work the way you implement it all the time. And so his simple comment that, you know, some accusers lie is absolutely 100% the truth. And yet USC wants him drummed out. And you know, just something, what did the dean say?
So
the
Jack Knott.
Jack Knott.
Again,
we got a hoe and a knot.
And a knot today.
What did Jack Knott have to say?
So he's the dean of public policy school. He caved, and he said that Moore's remarks were insensitive and incendiary. We're going to try to do everything we can to try to create a better school, to educate the faculty. Knott also promised that the university would take action, including having a faculty meeting, because I know you love your faculty meetings, around implicit bias, sensitivity towards sexual assault.
Implicit bias, right? You're implicitly biased as a man against women. So when a woman says something, shut up and take it, right? You're falsely accused, shut up and take it. If there's no evidence for what you say, shut up and take it. No, Mr. Knott, not gonna have it, right? The idea that you, a dean, have taken this position, that the response to an obvious stated fact is it's insensitive and incendiary. See, it wasn't incendiary that the entire listserv at the University of Southern California was basically told, we believe Dr. Ford no matter what. What's incendiary is one person stood up and said, hey, some people lie. And for that, you are a gutless coward who will not defend your own faculty. You are a gutless coward who puts feelings and sensitivities above the workings of reality. You are a coward who is willing to compromise a professor's right to speak his piece, his truth, right? Remember, Randall, Jared? Remember the Islamic woman on the West Coast who was making all these incendiary things in the wake of the death of George Bush, right?
Yeah, she finally got put on.
Yeah, Barbara Bush died.
Research,
she said, good, she deserved to die, all this stuff. And all these California liberal professors and deans came out and said, hey, we don't necessarily share her view, but she has every right to say that Barbara Bush was a warmongering monster who should have been dead. We shouldn't celebrate her death. Here comes an engineer at one of the California schools who says, you know what? As an engineer, we know sometimes bolts don't hold. Sometimes women accusers lie. And for that, a dean is throwing him under the bus. We're going to force the entire faculty into sensitivity training because some engineer didn't keep his mouth shut about the truth. That's where your universities are today.
Yeah, and I like what Moore said, too, because he must have seen the rally, because he said he thought the rally against him was well organized. An engineer would kind of orchestrate that opinion. And he said the whole point of a university is that it's a place for points of view and discourse. And if they happen to disagree, the way to respond is to engage rather than terminate the source of the information that you disagree with. My primary objective was protecting the interests of folks who might be falsely accused of misconduct. My goal was protecting students, not traumatizing or bullying them.
What he was doing was not speaking a point of view. They were. It was a point of view to argue women don't lie. It was a point of view to argue all women should be believed. It's not a fact, because we know factually it's not true. What he was doing was uttering facts. Not all accusers tell the truth.
I mean, Terry Clark said it too. Girls lie too.
Well, of course they do.
They do.
And the fact that he came out and said that, never does that suggest that all women lie. They're saying all women tell the truth, which is not true. That's a point of view. You're entitled to have it. However illogical and empirically false it is, but the engineer's speaking the truth, and he's the one under assault.
Yeah, and we have another one under assault. We have a woman, law professor Amy Wax. She's a Penn law professor. She basically did an interview with Brown University economist Glenn Loury, and she criticized various points of the Me Too movement and then with Kavanaugh and what's happening with Ford. And so for that, there's a giant petition saying that she should be fired. Yeah. So she criticized the Me Too movement, and then she talked about Ford and Kavanaugh, saying the movement for Me Too turned women into incredibly fragile, vulnerable creatures. And she says the movement had a childish idea of justice. She said there is no such system. We either have a presumption of innocence, just as a norm, a social norm, a legal standard, and that means that certain people who are guilty will go free, or we have a system where the mere accusation is an indictment and a conviction. Why even bother having a hearing if we have to believe all the victims?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Get rid of the justice system if you have, and this gets interesting, right? Because not all women have vaginas, the transgender people tell us. So how far do we extend that? If you're a man in every way, but you think you're a woman, do you have absolute immunity to accuse everybody else too? I guess they'd have to say yes, right? And so you're right. Get rid of the justice system and just have a vaginal system, right? A vagio system, where depending upon the junk in your pants, we verify your veracity, right? Are you sporting or are you not sporting? Right? Ovaries or testicles? Guilty or innocent?
I don't like these binary choices.
They're binary choices. Yeah, horribly binary these choices are. But you go back to this, right? She said what is obviously the truth. But there's one way I would correct Professor Wax. The hashtag #MeToo movement is simply a symptom of what's been going on in universities with feminism for years. So hashtag #MeToo is just what we call it as it break contains from the universities. So number one, this has a much longer history than hashtag #MeToo. And second of all, it didn't just turn women into fragile, emotional, broken people. It gave them cover. Any woman, because of the patriarchy, is fragile, broken, and emotional, but also gets to be a bully now. From a position of fragile, broken emotionalness, right, because of the evils of patriarchy, all women get to demand guilty until proven innocent, right? All women now get to be bullies from their position of weakness. Never has a position of weakness intellectually conferred more dictatorial value than the modern feminist movement. At one and the same time, hopelessly, helplessly victimized. Bette Midler, quoting John Lennon, called women the N-word of the world the other day, right? The N-word, black people, the N-word, aren't N-words anymore. They apparently have risen. Women now are the N-word of the world, said Bette Midler, quoting John Lennon. So even blacks are out of luck here. I guess black women would still qualify, but not black men. And so what you've got here is a weird situation where for all the fragility that being the N-word of the world implies for women, boy, isn't it amazing that we're empowering them on college campuses. We're empowering them in the Democrat halls of Senate and Congress. We're empowering them in journalist and media circles to say whatever they want to about anybody they want to, and we will not cast one doubt or one aspersion. Meanwhile, dozens and dozens and dozens of women are accusing people like Bill Clinton and Keith Ellison of rape, sex, and abuse. And where is their absolute authority? They're just broken women who shouldn't be listened to. Where are the ears of our universities, our Democrat politicians, our journalists, when Keith Ellison's wife comes forth and claims, with a bruised face to prove it, that he beat me? Suddenly, all women shouldn't be listened to.
Only in that instance.
They shouldn't.
Shouldn't. Well, you're talking a lot about diversity, so we're going to talk about Kavanaugh and how he's going to now undermine diversity on college campuses, because at least according to University of Texas at Austin, a law professor and a postgraduate fellow, having confirmed Kavanaugh means that these college campuses are no longer going to be diverse. I mean, it's a logical argument, clearly. So the guys, well, it's Siobhan Henderson and Martin Camp. So they wrote an op-ed called "Kavanaugh Could Undermine Diversity on College Campuses." They say the Supreme Court's longstanding position has been that colleges and universities have a compelling interest in diversity and may consider race among many factors when assessing qualified students for admission. But if Brett Kavanaugh is appointed, that position could change and would probably signal a return to pre-civil rights era race-neutral admissions policies.
Pre-civil rights, to be race neutral in your admissions to college is now Jim Crow. Do you see how quickly that slips in there? This isn't a matter of ethics or equity anymore. This is not about diversity. Please give me a break. We've now equated treating people across races the same way as kind of Jim Crow era slavery and oppression. Let that sink in for a minute. And all of this is being attributed to Brett Kavanaugh.
It's all his fault. It's always.
You put him on the Supreme Court. That's going to happen, right? Remember when Joe Biden said, when he was running for vice president with Barack Obama, "These people want to put you back in chains. Put you back in chains." Old Joe, old Gropem Joe, right?
Creepy
Uncle Joe Biden, the same guy who apparently has watched too many episodes of The Simpsons because he thinks all Indians run 7-Elevens. Apu, right? Foot and mouth Joe Biden made the argument that you elect these Republicans are going to put you back in chains. You put Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court, and we're going to go back to an era, a horrible, horrible era, where we treat people equally regardless of their races. Oh my God, the horror. What is Joseph Conrad? The horror. The horror that we treat people equally before the law. We treat people equally without regard to the color of their skin. This is the goofy, backward-ass world that your academics live in.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, too, because if you haven't been paying attention, Harvard has a lawsuit that's going up next week against affirmative action policies that are affecting Asian American students. So this is going to get a little interesting.
Yeah, Asian kids are highly represented at Harvard because guess what? They do well on their entrance exams. Heaven forbid.
How dare they?
How dare they? And so now Harvard's discriminating against Asian kids. Harvard's walking the walk, right? We will not treat Asian kids based on their performance and their academic record. We will discriminate against Asian kids on the basis of their race, and we'll call that progress.
All right, so we still have tons of campus crazy. We have 10 ways to make social media channels more inclusive. At Colorado State University, they put this out on their very own website to let students know, hey, you need to be more inclusive. And they begin with, one way to be more inclusive online is to use inclusive pronouns. This includes they, them, their, students, Rams, everyone. Now at the university or Colorado State University, their mascot is Rams, but isn't a ram a male? And don't rams?
No, you got to look at it from a feminist perspective. A ram is an impenist female.
That's a good point. That's a good point.
All sheep are female. Right?
Yes.
Every now and then one slips through the cracks. The gelders are not fast enough, and a sheep is allowed to be a ram. When that horrible mistake against nature is made, we call them impenist sheep, right? We won't call them rams.
Impenist sheep.
And yes, the purpose of a ram is to butt heads with other rams for the privilege of assaulting sheep, right?
Okay.
I mean, so it's pretty much it.
Okay.
Colorado, if you want to get woke, Colorado, change your motto, your mascot. The University of Colorado, is it Colorado or Colorado State?
Colorado State.
Colorado State. You could be the University of Colorado State sheep. I can't think of a better mascot for any university, the sheep.
That would be delightful. All right. Another one they say is to make sure when you're on social media, if you're going to be inclusive, you use the yellow emojis when addressing a diverse audience. So the yellow emojis somehow, some way make it more inclusive than any of the other colors.
We've got emojis in all different colors now, but who decided that yellow is the default? Who decided that?
I have no idea.
So yellow emoji you're allowed to use biracially.
Yep. Okay. But you better not use the gendered emojis. So it has to be yellow, non-gendered emojis.
The one and only university we should use for college and campuses is the one Mike's about to show you. That pretty much one great big steaming pile.
All right. Well, the best one I like is with their example they put for the avoiding the gendered emojis when possible and using variations of the yellow smiley faces. The example they have actually has white-skinned people in the little emojis, and they have Big Booty Judy, who's responding, and they put a
Big Booty Judy.
Yep, Big Booty Judy. And it also, someone commented, I think the guy who took our flag up. So the examples they do don't even represent.
Just look at the picture on their own website. You've got a 60s era van with a 10-speed bicycle and a kayak. No black person ever has been seen in those forms of transportation. Not one black person in the history of America has ever rode in a 60s van, kayaked, or rode a cheesy Schwinn 10-speed bicycle.
This is like
right there. That's a white suburban college professor vacation picture right there.
So we have to take a look at some biological essentialism and basically how campus feminists are opposing it.
This is a big story. We'll go ahead and repeat that lead, because of all the stories we've done today, this may be the one that's most chilling. Go ahead.
So we have this quote. It's a campus or the College Fix article, and groups are opposing trans exclusionary politics. What's basically happening is there's been a turf war, if you will, with feminists and the term TERF, T-E-R-F, trans exclusionary radical feminist, and it's basically a point of contention. You have the feminists who think that cisgender women or women, that their interests don't intersect with transgender women, and then you have, the transgender women would be the men, and they then are called trans exclusionary. And what's happening is we have all these groups, and College Fix took a look and interviewed some people asking at different campuses, what is it that your campus feminists kind of believe? And they are, all these groups pretty almost unanimously are saying that they are not trans exclusionary. They asked, for instance, the Indiana University Feminist Student Association, and they said that feminism is intended to be supportive, inclusive, and empowering. So we do not support or promote any branches of feminism that seek to isolate marginalized populations like trans individuals. Feminism is for everyone. Gender is personal, and it is in opposition to our beliefs and goals to follow strict definitions of masculinity or femininity and gender. And you can interpret that to mean,
well, read the title again.
We oppose biological essentialism.
We oppose biological essentialism. That's a needlessly complicated academic way of saying we are not going to let science tell us what we believe about ourselves. The fact that biological male and female are underwritten throughout all of nature, that doesn't matter. We reject, and let's let this sink in, we reject as feminists what science tells us. Science does not get to tell us what reality is. We will live in our own realities. We will create our own realities. So again, you have perhaps the most strident statement to date that says, look, when it comes to the science, and now you understand, we've done so many shows, stories on the show, going back months now, about how the sciences were being undone by campus radicals. That feminist biology, green chemistry, that what used to be known as independent science, our engineering friend in California, who's in trouble now, right, for telling a simple truth. If you think sending your kids to college and having them major in engineering or having them major in chemistry or math is going to save them from this, you're wrong. What these radical campus feminists are saying is we categorically reject the essentialism, the truth, the empiricism behind biology. We will create our own genders. And then we're going to, all this inclusive talk is nonsense. We're going to pit our genders against your politics. We're going to pit our genders against your scientific method. And if you defend yourself like the engineer did, then you're sexist.
Yeah. And basically, when you look at this article, all of the examples they have about the trans exclusionary and how, we're so inclusive, all of the universities are the ones who are saying, we don't believe in the biology. The one, actually, which kind of shocked me, who said, you know what, women actually are kind of being excluded when we have the transgender, was Rose McGowan, who's the central figure of the Me Too movement. She says that basically men who identify as women, they assume because they felt like a woman on the inside, that's not developing as a woman, that's not growing as a woman, that's not living in this world as a woman.
Well, that used to be feminism 10 years ago, right? That used to be,
exactly.
That we are going to radically protect women's spaces from men. In a way, men have co-opted feminism, and not in a let's get the hell rid of it sort of way, but in a we too. Men have figured out, shiftless, lazy, man-bun-wearing academic men have figured out that they're going to be on the outside looking in simply because they have penises. So what have these men decided to do? To identify as women, right? To become women, because it has very little to do with personal desire and has everything to do with being part of the crowd, having the perks. There's nothing like being lectured about feminism by a man who's pretending to be a woman. It's just it's the height of hypocrisy. And yet, as you're hearing on the college campuses, you cannot dispute this anymore. Sororities now are having to accept male members. Well, men. How you want to phrase that. This is the death of feminism is what this is. Feminism, as we know it, will be dead in 10 years. And they're going to have to come up with some better intersexual collectivist name for it. And what will happen is as all of the environmentalism and all of the sexuality, all the kinky sexuality gets worked in here, all of the transgender imperatives, by the time the dust settles with this, they're going to have to reconfigure all of this under one rubric.
I don't believe a word you say.
Well, you shouldn't. I'm a man.
So right now, since I don't want to believe anything he says, let's go to an interview with Dr. Duke and Alex Newman, which was done earlier today, right from this seat.
Happy to be back with you again, Alex Newman. Alex Newman, as you know, is our international reporter traveling the globe. He's in his most exotic site yet. He's here with us in Appleton, Wisconsin, way off in the middle of nowhere. Alex, good to have you in studio.
Great to be with you. Thanks so much, Duke.
You've written another blockbuster story about a huge, the omnibus bill, right? Omnibus bill. President Trump said he would never sign another one of these, right? No wall, no money for the wall, Planned Parenthood fully funded, and ouch, the largest budget for American public schools in the history of the Republic.
That's right. We have the biggest budget for the U.S. Department of Education that we have ever had. Huge increases in spending, another $250 million for Head Start, more money for the Office of Civil Rights, the one that Obama used to try to jam the transgender bathrooms down the throats of every school in the country. And all this after President Trump said on the campaign trail when he was running that we ought to even consider closing the Department of Education. We got to get the feds out of education. He signed an executive order saying get the feds out of education. So this, to me, feels like a big betrayal. It's a sad state of affairs when members of Congress can do something like this and Trump sign it without anybody even talking about it. Everyone was so focused on Kavanaugh that we didn't even notice this massive betrayal by the Republicans in Congress who always say, oh, we want to get rid of the Department of Education. They've been saying that since Reagan, and here they are, biggest funding ever. So it's terrible.
Well, if we had $1 for every time establishment Republicans put a knife in our back, we could fund the education bill. Right? We could fund it all. But you and I were talking before on the set here that it almost makes me wonder. Trump said he would never sign another omnibus like this. The Kavanaugh thing had blown up. If I were a less suspicious man, I might make the argument that maybe, just maybe, in order to get Kavanaugh confirmed by some of these 4 or 5 holdouts, including Susan Collins, including Flake, maybe even the Democrat Manchin, maybe Trump had to promise that he'd pass this omnibus, right? I hate to be cynical that way, but it wouldn't surprise me. And the 250 million Head Start elephant in the room here is we know American schools are failing. We know the Head Start program doesn't make kids smarter or more prepared for school. We know that the American public school system, with Common Core and standardized testing and outcome-based education, we absolutely know that it's not making our kids smarter or better prepared for college. So clearly all we can conclude from this, Alex, is that this is not really an education bill. It's let government, federal government, be the baby mommy daddy. This is the federal government now assuming the rights and responsibility of parents to feed kids at the preschool level, to begin to social emotional wellness garbage that we've talked about a lot on this program. Talk about what's really going on here.
Yeah, well, the Department of Education, as we've spent so much time talking about on this show, as we've written so extensively in FreedomProject Media, their goal now, and even under Betsy DeVos, right, people expected something different. Unfortunately, we're seeing more of the same. The goal is to not just nationalize education, with the Common Core, with the ESSA, but even to globalize education. And we're seeing that right now. They're trying to replace parents. They're trying to increasingly sideline them. They fund, of course, these full-service community schools where basically the schools take over the dentistry, the doctor's visits, the nutrition. Every element of a child's life is now going to be dictated by federal bureaucrats. And, we know we were just talking about this a few weeks ago. Betsy DeVos went down to Argentina and signed on to this G20 education globalization scheme, this declaration that says we're going to submit to UNESCO, we're going to use social emotional learning to manipulate all the kids. This is an absolute betrayal, and Trump needs to go back to that executive order and say, DeVos, look, this is not what I asked for. You are fired. And he needs to have some responsibility for himself. Why did he sign this bill? I think, there may be something to this idea. We were listening to Thomas Massey the other day, talking about how Washington politics works. The deep swamp, as he called it, is so grotesque. The average American can't even fathom how this place operates. And unfortunately, there's so much of this behind-the-scenes garbage where, you get my thing in the bill and I'll vote for it and this and that and the other. Shady dealing. And this is not what Americans voted for a year and a half ago, 2 years ago.
Yeah, Donald Trump promised to drain the educational swamp, when in reality, unfortunately, what he's doing is he's building all sorts of United Nations condo guest houses all around the swamp, right? Yeah. The swamp is not just getting bigger, it's getting globalist. And I go back to the original point here. We have not a shred of evidence, not one positive shred of evidence that our kids are reading better, writing better, better at science, better at math. Our kids can't write cursive language anymore. Our kids know nothing about their history. Propaganda now has taken over history, social studies courses. I love that switch. We don't teach kids history anymore. We teach them social studies, right? What's going on with your kids in American government schools is they are one big social studies experiment. We are using these kids, the public schools, as a petri dish in which to experiment on them sociologically, to override their own ambitions and individuality, to psychosocially evaluate these kids, to sexualize these kids, to politicize these kids, to turn these kids into ideological-driven kids, not learning-driven kids, and all being funded with greater and greater numbers by our own federal government.
That's right. And, not only are they not getting smarter in exchange for all this, they're getting dumber. And we can show this objectively, right? Just you can look at the SAT scores, go back to the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, and you see that the smart kids today are dumber than the dumb kids back then. And, how do they explain this? If federal funding improved education, we should all be super geniuses by now. And instead, just the opposite's happening. We're getting dumber. We're getting more indoctrinated. We're losing our morality. Our civilization is crumbling before our eyes. And the bulk of the problem can be laid at the feet of the educational system, and that is headquartered right now in Washington, D.C., and increasingly at UNESCO.
And if you had to break it down to one real simple, we're throwing lots of word salad at you, ESSA, things that we've talked about 1,000 times in the program, and I know our smart audience knows most of what that means. However, if we're going to break it down to the lowest common denominator, you want one low common denominator, one talking point, one bumper sticker argument right here. What we have done now is at every level of government, not just nationally but internationally, we have committed to treating kids as cogs in a collective wheel. We are not teaching kids as individuals. We're not dealing with them as individuals in the same way that we're ignoring the individual communities these kids come from and the individual religious traditions out of which they emanate. We're ignoring the individual states and what their attitudes towards education might be. Everything is collectivized, everything is federalized, and it's getting bigger than that. The idea of the human being as the cog in the machine, this is utilitarian education. It is outcome-based. It doesn't matter where you are or how hard you work or what you know. This is about processing kids, finding slots for them to fill based on corporate economies and government need. This is a whole bunch of bad stuff that we thought we had defeated when we won World War II, we thought we had it licked. When we tore down the wall, we thought we had it licked. All right? And we haven't had it licked. As a matter of fact, globalist, corporate, quasi-fascist socialism is making a huge return, and its entry into our culture is education at the lowest levels.
That's right, and now they have a whole lot more federal dollars to do. So we're going to borrow money from China to make our kids dumber and more brainwashed. I mean, we have got to be completely nuts, and it's time for the American people to demand from Congress that this stuff stop.
And you mentioned China, which is remarkable, because the kind of education we're giving kids is a Chinese education. We're paying China all this money to build their army with our debt. And meanwhile, we're importing from China not just a bunch of third world junk and tchotchkes to sell at Walmart. We are importing from China an educational system that is utilitarian, outcome-based. It is repressive. It is ideological. It is propaganda-based, all to make kids good, loyal servants of the state.
That's right. And, I tell people this all the time. This is the battle that if we lose, all the other battles are lost, right? We may be able to defend gun rights for another 10 years, maybe 20 if Kavanaugh and these others are as good on the Supreme Court as we think they're going to be. But over the long run, they've got 87% of the kids in government school. We know a lot of the private schools now are even joining the dumbed down Common Core, ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act bandwagon. A lot of the federal funding coming through the local districts, taking it over. Our freedom and our republic are not going to survive under these kind of circumstances. So unfortunately, we expected that under Donald Trump, things would start going the other direction, right? The power would start being devolved back to state and local government. The Common Core would be gone. Some of these insane mandates would be gone. Instead, what we're seeing is the ongoing centralization, and now, again, they have more money to do it with. This is just disgusting, and everybody ought to be on the phone with their member of Congress asking what's going on here.
We had a mom, an anecdotal story. We had a mom call us just last week. She had her kids in a really expensive private school, a feeder school for the Ivy League, a lot of money. And she found out that all of a sudden her older kids, when they went through that school, were getting a great education. They could read, they could write, they could spell, they could do math. And now her younger kids who are going back through that school, way behind. And when she confronted the principal basically said, oh, yeah, we had to take Common Core. We couldn't, whenever kids came to us from the public schools, they couldn't pass our rigorous curriculum. And our enrollment was suffering. So we willfully adopted Common Core. We lowered our standards to make ourselves online with the public schools. We wooed public school moms into our school, charged them a lot of money for an ostensibly free public school education, and gave them Common Core. That's where we are in 2018.
Yeah, and through this Every Student Succeeds Act, we're seeing the exact same thing. We're seeing through federal money going down to the local districts, they're hijacking control of these private schools. They sucker them in. The local school district getting federal money, they'll say, hey, we'll give professional development to your teachers. We'll give you ideas on a new reading program so we can start using the the dumbed down whole word method that is basically a tool for mass producing illiteracy. And so now this is coming into even the private schools, even the Christian schools. And unfortunately, Congress and Donald Trump, Republican Congress, Republican president, now a conservative, allegedly Supreme Court, and still it's all happening. So, it's frustrating, and we do have to keep this fight up again, because if we lose on it, it's all over on all the rest of the issues that we care about. So,
Mom and Dad, just keep in mind that there is no R and there is no D in the word swamp. Swamp creatures come in every particular iteration you can possibly imagine.
So for today's final story, we're going to take a look at a liberal professor who wants activists to be considered veterans. LGBTQ Nation op-ed article titled, "Is it time to expand the definition of veteran?" by Dr. Warren J. Blumenfeld. He's an adjunct at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst College of Education, of all places, and he's the author of Warren's Words, Smart Commentary on Social Justice. So you know where this op-ed is going. He says, "Individuals who stand up and put their lives on the line to defend our country from threats to our national security, as those in our nation's military do, are true patriots and veterans. But true patriots and veterans are also those who speak out, stand up, and put their lives on the line by actively advocating for justice, freedom, and liberty through peaceful means."
Yeah, so peaceful means. You're telling me, what this is? This is stolen glory. This is stolen honor. This is a crime. You are going to try to make a link now, and I'm not the least bit surprised they're doing it, between social justice idiots screaming down Ted Cruz at dinner time, driving Sarah Sanders from the Red Hen when she's trying to have a meal, standing up like children dressed as handmaids, scratching the door of the Supreme Court. You're going to argue now, Antifa, throwing bricks through cop cars and pooping in the windows, right? Graffiti. You're telling me now that radical leftist social justice warriors should be treated the exact same way in our culture as American veterans of foreign war should. This is stolen honor. It is stolen glory. You don't the American police will not stop you. When you block traffic like just happened in Portland, you social justice lunatics, and you start redirecting traffic while Portland police are standing there watching you hijack traffic in the streets and do nothing, you face no threat. You face no challenge. No one's shooting at you. No one is coming for you. There are no landmines in your way. You're stealing glory from American patriots, and you want to steal their veterans' benefits, and you want to steal the parades in their honor on Memorial Day because you protest in the streets of America against what you call injustice. It is shameful, shameful. And the fact that this is going to get legs, because it will, right? The word social justice warrior, you watch what's going to happen in 20 years if nothing stops. Actually, then, the social justice warrior who protests Kavanaugh from London, right, doesn't want to come back to her country, she becomes a greater military hero than people who actually fought in wars, because they fought their wars with guns and bullets. They actually killed the enemy. We just didn't let them eat. We just drove them from the comfort of the restaurants they were sitting in. Our activism, once you see that they're veterans, once you see that they merit what all the American veteran soldiers get, the minute you say those are the same things, and that's why I'm so angry about this, the minute you accept that false dichotomy, then guess what? The social justice campus warrior actually becomes a bigger hero than the Marine fighting with guns, the Marine fighting in foreign countries. How dare our Marines go over to foreign nations and fight? What business does an American and Marine have fighting in Afghanistan? And so consequently, the liberal social justice warrior becomes the true hero. Stop it now before this escapes containment like every other bad liberal argument and then becomes law in 20 years.
And with that, let us know your thoughts. Make sure you head over to drdukeshow.com. Listen to this again on your podcast, any version. We have the iTunes, Google Play. Get the podcast wherever you can.
And that does it for us this week on The Dr. Duke Show. If you like what you heard, please share the podcast with your friends and tell them to subscribe. Really helps us out. For Freedom Project, I'm Dr. Duke. She's Katie, and we will see you again next time. No stolen valor for snowflakes.